Hey folks, welcome back to the Portable Gamer, welcome back to RaceRoom Racing Experience, and welcome to, this is some DTM, you say DTM, you say GTC. German touring cars from Zandvoort in, where is that? That's in Holland, yeah? And decided to go with something a little different. You know, I just got into RaceRoom somewhat recently, and I'll tell you a little bit about the sim, but I'm always in that AMG SLS, right? The big Mercedes, the GT3. But let's try something a little bit different. So we're in the DTM C63 Mercedes, or the Mercedes C63 for DTM, for GTC, however you want to say it. It's more or less GT3 racing, but different cast of characters, different cars. More on the, I don't know, less on the sports side, more, well, obviously more on the touring side, but all the lines are so blurred between those different classes. It's like NASCAR in the United States. NASCAR is supposed to represent stock cars, and they're all, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, a lot of different crossover in racing. A lot of racing to me just comes down to, it's just sports cars. You know, even though they're classified as touring, or whether they're coupes, sedans, pure sports cars, hypercars, whatever, it all comes down to, it's just sports car racing. So, yeah, decided to take this for a spin, and I noticed that in RaceRoom, I've had the sim for a while, but I've never really gotten into it, and, you know, I typically set everything on, all my graphics settings are high with a couple of ultras. It recommended some really high settings. Epic is their top level setting. I backed some things down to high all across the board, and in car I was getting, I don't know, 50 to 60, but it looked just the tiniest bit choppy every now and then. Even though the FPS counter up in the corner was saying that I had 60 FPS, it just felt choppy. So I backed a couple of things down, and I don't notice any difference. You know, as I'm looking at this, it's not exactly eye candy, but I have no problem with this render, and this is with some things back down. So it got rid of the chop. Happy about that, and I've got no complaints. I continue to, as I do in almost all my racing sims, I do continue to sort of struggle with the AI and what the perfect setting is, where you have a good, fun, challenging race with an uncertain outcome, and at the same time you're not getting just beat up every lap. Same thing happened. It took me one lap, maybe 1.5 laps to get out in front, and I start putting like 1 second per lap on these gangsters, so we don't need to go the full race. But yeah, it's the cool thing about RaceRoom is the variety of cars, and the fact that there are cars and classes in this sim that you really don't find anywhere else. And also the, how do I want to say this, like the complexity and the density of the classes. So there's, like, they've got DTM, you say DTM, you say GTC, but it's German touring cars. It's got like year after year after year, right? 2013, 2014, etc., of the cars, and not just the cars and models, but the liveries and the drivers that were in that series that year. Really, really cool if you're into that sort of thing. It's got the, what is it, the ADAC GTM Master. It's just chock full of cars, and they're executed in, the only way that I can say it is in a very thoughtful way. You know, it's not, it feels like a labor of love. It doesn't feel like they're trying to please anybody. It feels like this is something that they are really, really into. So, yeah, man, I'm digging it, and it'd be fun if we were racing with somebody, but we got off the front, and that's just how that goes. So, yeah, I'll do another lap or two. The other cool thing about this game is the physics are good. I have no complaints about the physics. It might not be as good as something like iRacing or R-Factor 2, but all of these sims, I mean, there's going to be an ultimate sim someday. Maybe it's a Assetto Corsa Competizione. There is going to be an ultimate sim that has the physics of iRacing, which is, a lot of people feel that that's the best physics of any race sim, but the graphics are, you know what I'm saying? Not so much. And then on the other end, you have Project Cars 2 or even Forza, which is incredibly immersive on the graphics side, but the physics are pretty arcade game. So maybe Assetto Corsa Competizione will be the race sim that brings those two things together. I feel like this is the the physics might not be as good as iRacing, but I have no complaints about them. This is not, it's not a sim that I would hop into and say like, oh, you know, it doesn't even feel real. It feels pretty legit, I have to say. And the graphics are, well, that's always the trade-off. You know, you can have Forza-style graphics, but you don't necessarily have a lot of processor left to run the physics side with. And I feel like that's where the compromise is. Although, to be fair, for Forza, I think that is for people that are looking for more of an arcade experience. You get into something like Forza Horizon, where you're trying to smash mailboxes and park benches. Not exactly simulation. But Project Cars 2 clearly is a sim, and it does have that immersive factor, but in comparison, if you just play Project Cars 2 as a standalone game, physics are fine. But as you start playing it back-to-back with Assetto Corsa, R-Factor, iRacing, RaceRoom, and the rest of these more realistic, less graphically demanding, graphically satisfying, I guess, sims, that's when Project Cars 2 kind of shows its true colors, so to speak. So yeah, man, I'm digging having all these sims. And the other thing I can tell you about RaceRoom, if you're not familiar with this, is it's set up almost the way iRacing is, where it comes with a couple of basic tracks, a couple of basic cars, and then everything else you buy. But you only have to buy what you're specifically interested in. So that's an interesting model. And the other cool thing is there's tons of overlap. And I think there's some overlap in iRacing, but not like in RaceRoom. In RaceRoom, there's one package you can buy that has absolutely everything in it, and then you get an incredible discount. But as you get other things in the store, you'll notice that the discount increases every time you go back to the store for different packages. And the reason it's increasing is because you've bought single things here and there, or you've bought other packages that overlap. So eventually, if you buy every pack, right, then the price for that inclusive pack will drop to zero. It'll be 100% discount because you already own everything in it, if that makes sense. So yeah, you can just get what you want. If there's a particular year of a particular series that really, you know, if you're just crazy about the GTC series from 2015, that's all you have to buy. So it's I guess it's just another way of looking at how these sims all come together and what makes them fun and what makes them playable. So we'll complete this lap. I don't know how many this is, probably 6 or 7. It's a 10-lap sprint race. Spoiler alert, we did win. So we'll go ahead and close out this lap and we'll call it an episode. So yeah, man, RaceRoom racing experience in the Steam store. Check it out. It's very, very cool. Now, one thing, I have to fill like the next 15 seconds till we cross the start finish. One thing I can tell you that was really strange is I'm so used to the shift points for that big AMG SLS, and this thing, much smaller motor, and I can feel a lot more, I don't know, call it lag, call it spooling, but my shift points were in completely different places, and it took me quite a while to figure out, like, even though it's the same track and it's just another sports car, it took me a minute to figure out where the shift points were. Right, there's the start finish. Folks, thanks for stopping back to check out The Portable Gamer. Thanks for joining us for another episode of a RaceRoom racing experience from Zandvoort in Holland. I will see you next time. Take care now.